G'day, chaps. 'Tis I, Clumputcher139. And I will simply admit defeat. I was wrong. They were able to make the Rat King actually work. So the big question is, how? How on earth did they make this mystery work when I was just so adamant that it was outright impossible? And more importantly, why did it work here when it didn't work with the Arkham Knight? The way I see it, there are three big things the writers for Arkham Shadow did differently than the ones for Arkham Knight that majorly contributed to this twist feeling earned. Three factors that, in hindsight, are so glaringly obvious that it's crazy Rocksteady didn't already use them when they were writing Arkham Knight. So, let's talk about them, and learn together what it takes to make a great whodunit with an amazing twist villain.
I know what you're trying to do. But you don't get to be the hero tonight.
Reason number one for this mystery working is the fact that we have a large and constantly shifting suspect list. Throughout Batman's investigation in Blackgate, he goes through no less than 6 different suspects for who the Rat King could be, which in turn means you have multiple suspects throughout the game to shift your suspicions onto. Multiple suspects means that Batman, and by extension your player, always has someone to latch onto and pay extra attention to. At first, Batman suspects Falcone or one of his men.
Let's leave him to, reflect on the error of his ways.
Carmine directly told Bolton that he knew who the Rat King was, so became Batman's primary target when he got the chance to investigate himself. But upon defeating him, realizes that the lead goes nowhere, so has to start looking towards someone else. At Falcone's insistence, he starts looking into Otis Flanagan, the rat catcher. With the rat motif already behind him, it would make sense. But Otis is a follower at heart, so when he finds him in death row, he realizes that it's a dead lead and starts looking elsewhere.
We live on the streets, ignored, invisible, yet greater in number every day.
When he learns that Falcone was put into a rat-like ceremony by Bolton, he becomes the primary target.
The Falcone blood's running thin, but your blood will run plenty below.
But upon absolutely wrecking his shit in the cage as matches, taking him out of the equation entirely, he knows it can't be him either. After getting out of solitary, Falcone puts him on a new lead, Yamashiro.
What?
What?
The prisoner who tried to recruit him yet also ratted him out day one, who has also suddenly gone missing? Yeah, good enough suspect to start a lead. But then, upon rescuing Dr. Quinzel from Tiger Guards, she says that Crane is the Rat King, and he's been abducting his patients to recruit them.
I don't abduct people, I treat them!
Now Batman has 2 possible suspects on his radar. But Crane ends up clearing himself when he uses his prototype fear gas on Batman, and Batman once again takes him out. The next day, during his interrogation with Gordon and Dent, they reveal that Yamashiro was an undercover cop, and that he's just suddenly dead, so that suspect's off the table. But as soon as they take him out of the running, they start accusing you of being the Rat King, putting Bruce now in the hot seat.
Either way, you're on the hook for killing one of the last honest cops in Gotham City.
And as Bruce starts getting more information from Flanagan, he's brought out of Blackgate for a pre-trial hearing against Falcone, where he accidentally creates Two-Face.
I'll kill you!
This incident lands him in very hot water with Bolton, who decides the only appropriate punishment is the gas chamber. And just when it seems like there's no way out, the rats watching the execution jump in and break Matches out, bowing at his feet as they believe that he is the Rat King.
Otis said you'd arrive as one of us, an inmate.
So now, you've got even more evidence that it might have been you the whole time. And as you fight your way back to the Batcave, you run into Otis again, who further claims that it was actually you the whole time.
What a fool I was. describing heaven to he who built it.
And by the time you finally reach the Ark and are about to confront the king himself, only then do you get the idea that it could be who it actually is from Yamashiro, in a line where all he says is that Dent is on board.
You saw Harvey Dent?
Just heard his voice. He's on board.
And those are just the suspects that Batman himself is putting his eyes on. That doesn't take into account the various suspects the player might have as well. Obviously, during my first playthrough, my main suspect was Anarchy, so I kept waiting to hear about him in some way throughout the whole game. By the final chapter, I began throwing suspicion at Joe, who I had previously clocked as being Joe Chill, and who had mysteriously vanished on the Day of Wrath. Joker was a possible suspect before his appearance in Solitary, but was obviously at the bottom of my priorities list.
Look, I'd love to take credit for everything going on right now, but this one actually isn't me. And I want you to know when it's me, baby. That way you and I will be playing our little game until the day we die. Besides, the first rule of comedy is never repeat a gag.
And even the ones who had supposedly been cleared, like Falcone and Flanagan, were still kind of on my radar by the endgame, because I found it was still possible for either of them to do a surprise 180 on me and reveal, oh, I was actually the Rat King the whole time. But out of all the suspects, I think the best one we got to throw off our trail was you. When the rats break you out of the gas chamber and start praising you as the Rat King, I didn't actually think it was some big twist that Bruce had been doing everything behind the scenes the whole time, that he was mind controlled or something. Now, I like this reveal because it put the idea in my head that there was never a Rat King to begin with. In real life, a Rat King is a conglomeration of multiple rats bound together by their tails. So when I saw the rats bowing to me, someone I knew for a fact was innocent, it made me recall that fact and think that there never was a head to this cult. It was just a bunch of followers coming together over a common cause, trying to find their leader that never actually existed. So when they found Matches, someone who was acting on their exact principles, they assumed that it must be him. If nobody knew who the Rat King truly was, then maybe he didn't actually exist, and we just escalated a problem by trying to solve it. So when it was revealed that there was actually a Rat King and our efforts weren't in vain, I was beyond relief. But really think about that. Arkham Shadow is able to spend its entire runtime constantly building up suspects and almost immediately dropping them soon after. Everyone is a suspect in this game, including yourself, and yet it's always believable. While you'll certainly have your doubts about some and maybe even hard focus on some others, the fact of the matter is that you will always have someone on your suspect list. There's never a moment where the game goes, there's so many possible suspects, but none of them are viable, so we're just gonna throw all of them out and say that this person you're chasing can't be anybody. Because that is exactly the problem that Arkham Knight ran into. Arkham Knight doesn't give you a suspect list. In fact, it spends every chance it can get to tell you why someone isn't a suspect rather than the other way around. Alfred spends almost the entire game behind the scenes sorting through possible suspects, then coming back to Batman to say that none of them came back with anything. And that's all that happens. Bruce never takes a moment to formulate possible suspects himself. He never goes to any of the supercriminals and demands information about the Arkham Knight. The only time it seems like he's invested in learning about his identity is when he's directly confronting the man himself and he just asks, "Who are you?" Aside from that, he never tries getting any information himself. He leaves it all to Alfred, who just does everything behind the scenes and never even asks for assistance in his endeavors. He just occasionally checks in with Batman about his progress, but the stats are always the same. "Sir, I came back with nothing. Expand your search and try again."
Nothing?
And that's just really boring. The fact that we aren't given possible suspects means that players are only allowed to come up with suspects ourselves. And when that happens, we stick to one subject the entire time and never deviate from it. because we're never given any new information to prove or negate our guess. Players that don't guess Jason Todd won't end up guessing him by the endgame because they're never given any evidence to suggest that he's a suspect. And players who do guess Jason will end up being right because they're never given any evidence against their idea. So either way, it just doesn't lead to a satisfying reveal because you just have no other suspects. And for more proof that this works, look at 3 of the greatest whodunits of all time: Knives Out, Clue, and Scream. Every single person we see in these movies is a suspect. And every time some new piece of evidence comes up, it's always to add someone to the list. Every member of the family in Knives Out could be guilty because they all have the motivation to kill the old man, but none had the opportunity. Everyone in Clue had the opportunity to kill Mr. Body, and a reason, so it all becomes a matter of figuring out who before everyone else in the house is dead. And in Scream,
Everybody's a suspect!
Come on, they said it themselves. There's never a moment in these movies where the detective comes in and says, "This case is simply impossible. None of them could have done it, so none of them are suspects. Moving on." Instead, it's the exact opposite, where they literally don't eliminate any suspects.
I have eliminated no suspects.
And that's what Arkham Shadow does so well. It creates a long list of possible suspects to shove in your face, distracting you from the actual evidence of the Rat King's identity being placed right in front of you. You're left to mull over all of this evidence for 5 straight chapters until it's finally revealed which one you missed or which one you were able to suss out. Either way leading to a satisfying reveal. Arkham Knight just doesn't have that long list, which makes the reveal ultimately feel like a complete waste of time. The second reason is less a praise of Arkham Shadow as it is a criticism of Arkham Knight, and it's something I've gone over in pretty much every one of my videos on the subject. The reason the Arkham Knight reveal isn't satisfying is because of the cutscenes that randomly appear out of nowhere to teach us about Jason Todd. The first 2/3 of Arkham Knight have little to no information about Jason Todd, aside from a few throwaway lines from Joker.
They'd better not kill Robin, Bats. I had the idea first.
Then, suddenly during the movie studio's arc, we're just bombarded with the story of how Batman's second Robin, who we have never seen in this series prior to this exact moment, was tortured and killed by Joker. Absolutely nothing prompts them to come up. Jason isn't randomly mentioned by someone in the studios, and Joker hasn't said anything about him for hours by this point. Batman just randomly decides to start having flashbacks about a character that is only now being introduced to us.
I'm fine, Jason. Tim.
You haven't done that for a while.
Now, we as post-players know that these scenes were only put in to establish Jason Todd to an uninitiated audience prior to his reveal at the end of the game. If they hadn't done these, there would have been no precedent for the character to exist, making it an impossible deduction for players to make. But the simple fact is that having them at all ruins the surprise, because it, quite literally, shines a giant spotlight on Jason. Meanwhile, on the Arkham Shadow side, you'd assume that we have the same problem with all the Harvey flashbacks. Every time Batman goes to sleep in this game, he has a memory of a time he and Harvey were kids, growing up together in Leslie's group home. These sound like the exact same thing as the Jason flashbacks, right? Well, they have multiple distinctions that make them simply work. For one, it's a character that we already know, and have already been introduced to in this very game. It's Harvey, who we saw in Gordon's office earlier and had just saved from Shrike. It's a character that we already know in this series, simply getting more screen time as Harvey Dent rather than Two-Face.
Just make sure to leave some scraps for the DA's office this time.
Second, these appear constantly throughout the game, every time Batman goes to sleep, which just so happens to be at the start of every new chapter. Meaning they don't just appear out of nowhere because the game said so. They're dreams that Bruce is having while he sleeps, memories that he's looking back on of simpler times, before he needed to don the Batsuit.
Hey, what are you watching? Grey Ghost. You seen it? I don't think so. Well, it's good. I can rewind this and we can watch it together.
There's an ominous presence in the air tonight, Captain.
Hey, you're okay. You're okay.
Third, they don't even start with or entirely focus on Harvey. The first flashback we get is of Bruce the night his parents died, who was found and taken in by Leslie. Harvey is nowhere in sight until the second flashback. And even then, for most of the later ones, Harvey is there, but the focus is still ultimately on Bruce. It's setting up Bruce's character arc for the future, why he would eventually become Batman, how he would do it, and what he would do as a hero. Harvey is just kind of along for the ride for most of them.
You couldn't save anyone even if you tried. You hide like a coward and watch their suffering. Take that back. Hey, hit me. Cut it out.
It's not until the latter half of the game that they start focusing more on Harvey, with the two going to his father's house. But even then, the focus is more shown on Old Man Dent than young Harvey. And more importantly, on Bruce's reaction to Old Man Dent attacking them, as he tries to step between the two and protect Harvey. Until the final two, which are very clearly present to show the brotherly bond Bruce and Harvey made over the years, where the two are now adults. And these final scenes show up at the very end of the game. The first one when your suspect list is at an all-time high, and the second literally right after you learn that Harvey was the Rat King.
Well, you think you can just walk out of here? Out of this life I made for you? Sacrificed for you?
Fourth, the scenes are somewhat dismissed during the Scarecrow sequence of Chapter 4. During this section, you're shown alternate realities for two of the flashbacks if Batman were to give in to his shadow. You're shown an alternate timeline where Bruce's parents live, and an alternate timeline where Harvey's father dies. At that point, you're given a perfectly reasonable explanation for why these scenes keep showing up, so they could be brought back during this nightmare sequence. For some players, myself included, it'll make them dismiss all of the scenes in their entirety, because this is just what they were for. They were building up to Harvey's father for the sole purpose of showing an alternate timeline where Batman's shadow steps in and does what needed to be done. So when the scenes continue upon entering Chapter 5, most will probably dismiss them as the wrap-up to the Scarecrow stuff, showing that even though Shadow Batman didn't step in to save the boys, they still turned out okay in the end.
Bruce, I can't accept this.
Well, I'm gonna need someone to get me out of all the trouble I intend to get into. I love you, brother.
Finally, and most importantly, their focus isn't just on setting Harvey up. The Jason flashbacks only exist to establish Jason as a character and potential candidate for the Arkham Knight. They don't impact Batman in any way throughout the rest of the game. They come and go without any kind of fanfare. They show up in the studios and are never referenced again after that moment. All the other nightmare sequences are dedicated to Batman and Joker. It's only these three that have anything to do with Jason. The Harvey flashbacks, however, serve another purpose, which is furthering Batman's character arc. Don't get me wrong, their main purpose is absolutely setting up Dent as a character eligible for the Rat King, but their other purpose is to set the baseline for, and ultimately conclude, Batman's arc.
Someday, the bad people will get what they deserve. I will hunt him down and make him pay. Bruce!
Batman's arc in this game is all about introducing a little bit of care and compassion for the city he's fighting for, both in better understanding the criminals and wanting to help them if he can, and also doing what a hero needs to do and save people. Those concepts are all set up in these flashbacks. Batman doesn't come to the revelation that a hero needs to save people by himself. It was introduced to him by Leslie while the three were out watching the stars.
What else makes a hero?
They're strong. They beat up bad people.
Some do, yeah.
He doesn't learn that some criminals are mentally ill from his encounters with supercriminals, but through his first encounter with Harvey's father, who lashed out at the young boys one moment, then comforted them and apologized the next.
It's okay. It's okay. Come on. Bruce, is it? Come on out.
The flashbacks essentially tell us that Bruce knew all of these lessons before even becoming Batman, but he needed the events of this game to cement them in his mind and actually implement them into his crime-fighting capabilities.
But punishing bad guys isn't what makes a hero, you know. To be a hero, you have to save people too. The good people. Everyone.
It could be argued that these scenes put all the focus onto Harvey, just like the hallucinations did for Jason. And while that may be true for some players who are very keen to pick up on them, the simple fact is that they aren't in your face enough. They only show up between chapters, meaning that you go long periods of time between them. In all that time, you put new suspects on your list, you're doing a lot of fighting, and you're engaging with Batman's personal character arc. And during all that time, Harvey doesn't show up at all. You only see him midway through Chapter 1 and at the start of Chapter 5 in the interrogation room, therefore keeping Harvey completely off your mind until these scenes do show up. All of those factors serve to somewhat push these scenes to the back of your mind until you confront Harvey directly as the Rat King. While I did ultimately suspect Harvey by the end of the game, partly because of these flashbacks, they weren't why I ultimately guessed him. It was everything else throughout Chapter 5 that helped me cement it. The same cannot be said for Jason. When those hallucinations showed up in Arkham Knight, I immediately knew it was him, because they didn't serve any other purpose. They don't further Batman's character arc, they only appeared for this one section of the game, more than 2/3 of the way through by the way, and then try establishing a character we have never seen as one we're all super familiar with, and they try focusing exclusively on him. I mean, yeah, Joker's there too, but he's also dead, so there's no way he could be the Arkham Knight. It made the reveal too obvious because it didn't serve any other purpose, which is why Arkham Shadows worked for the entire game.
Hey!
Be safe and be good, Bruce Wayne.
You too, Harvey Dent.
The final and biggest reason the Rat King worked was because it wasn't just used for shock value. When Jason is revealed as the Arkham Knight, the game just takes its sweet-ass time letting you revel in this big twist that nobody saw coming, as it literally gives you a moment to gasp as Jason opens his helmet to let you applaud. It then gives us a long monologue from Joker explaining how Jason is here as Bruce and Jason just kinda stand in silence.
What's the matter?
And only then do we get to hear what's on Batman's mind.
Joker sent me the film. I saw him kill you.
And they're still going for the shock approach. Okay, Batman, we get it. Jason is the Arkham Knight. Can you express any emotion other than shock at the fact that your son has been trying to kill you? Maybe sadness or worry, concern, perhaps?
That's not what happened.
No, just shock. Okay. Want to show him how it's done, Shadow Batman?
When the clock
Harvey
strikes...
Arkham Shadow only takes a small moment to revel in the shock that Harvey is the Rat King. Batman says no in shock, then immediately goes into concern as he says, "Oh, Harvey." Bruce understands the situation immediately upon seeing Harvey behind the microphone. So rather than going crazy trying to process the reveal in his head, going through all the flashbacks one by one to show him the signs that were right in front of him the whole time, he just gets it and instantly goes towards consoling Harvey. Bruce has just learned that someone who was essentially his brother has started a movement that endangered thousands and is about to kill thousands more. And how does he react?
Dent, you're not well.
With sorrow, You can hear the sadness and confusion from both Bruce and Harvey in this scene, as Harvey is learning about this fact at the same time as you.
You are the Rat King.
You can see just as much shock pour across Harvey's face when he learns what's going on, which then immediately turns to sorrow as well. Bruce doesn't attack Harvey in his weakest and most vulnerable moment, but instead puts his hand on his shoulder in an attempt to console him. And you can tell by the music in the background that this isn't meant to be a big shocking moment, but a sad one as we see the end of the story between Bruce and Harvey and the start of the story between Batman and Two-Face. The difference in the two reveals couldn't be more obvious.
You really have no idea, do you, Bruce?
Jason, but you're dead.
No.
When the clock
Harvey.
strikes midnight, 10, we strike Gotham!
Arkham Knight tried to shock us, while Arkham Shadow tried to tell a story. The finale of Arkham Shadow isn't just about learning who the Rat King is. The Rat King reveal is honestly just a footnote in the series of events that unfold in this chapter. It's more about Batman coming to grips with the fact that his brother was the one behind this, and how he can handle it as gently as possible. He never attacks Harvey during this whole finale, instead choosing to remove his mask to save the man who killed his parents and reaching out to grab Harvey before he jumps over the edge. He could have just as easily disarmed Harvey before he could get a shot off on Joe, or grab him with the Batclaw so he didn't fall over. But instead, he took the big risks to ensure Harvey wasn't hurt. You do not see this same level of care in Arkham Knight, despite it being pretty damn similar of a case. Bruce just found out that his son is the one behind the night's events that endangered and potentially killed thousands. And how does he react? He doesn't. And despite Harvey reacting with violence against Bruce, Bruce never does the same to him. Meanwhile, when Jason only implies violence by sticking a gun to his chin, he immediately retaliates with a headbutt and beats the crap out of him for 5 straight minutes. And it's only after beating him up and seeing his face that he realizes, oh yeah, that's my son, I might need to handle this a bit more gently. Alfred, what do you think? And yeah, the emotion we were waiting for is there after Batman backs off, but it's too little too late. Arkham Shadow is nothing but the emotional resolution.
What is this? I'm gonna put this in my hand. I'm psychotic, Carly.
And that's what ultimately made the reveal all the more satisfying. Because it wasn't just there for the sake of being a big reveal. There was emotional weight behind it, a character arc, and it didn't try to pat itself on the back for being a great reveal when it just straight up wasn't.
You did this to me. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, brother. This isn't the end of me. No. This is the beginning of ours.
So, there we go. Follow these 3 simple steps and you got a shoo-in for a great twist villain. Have a long suspect list that's constantly changing with characters that your protagonist is constantly interrogating to get more information, rather than a non-existent list that only serves to say that it can't be anyone. Put enough evidence in to make your secret villain a possibility, while also ensuring that they actually exist within the universe beforehand, and make the evidence contribute to something else, like a red herring or a character arc. But if all else fails and you just can't do those other 2 for some reason, make sure that your reveal is more than just a reveal. Make it precede an intense emotional roller coaster for your protagonist that shows them struggling with the reveal being true, rather than just having them stand in silence for a full minute as your villain casually walks in circles. gotta be honest, after reading it all out loud, that is a lot harder than I made it sound. So, frankly, props to all the writers on Arkham Shadow for somehow making all of that actually possible. And with all that in mind, do all the YouTube stuff, because now I need to talk about Batman's character arc. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later, chaps.
Bad news, kid.